Well, thanks for being here. Sarah said something interesting. She said it's interesting to see so many new faces. And I'm like, that's really good when you talk about population growth and population change. If you want to look for answers today, I'm not going to give you answers. I'm going to ask a whole bunch of questions. For the last couple of weeks, and for myself for the last couple of days, I've been working on this population stuff to try to figure out what's going on in Idaho. And I'm just surprised how complicated it is. It's not as easy as people think. We all talk about all these Californians coming here. It's really, there's much more to it than that. So I'm going to try to show you how it is different and all the kind of different things that we're finding. This is going to be part of a larger project that I'm doing with my students about trying to figure out what is the state of Idaho and what are the changes that the state is facing, which goes well beyond, and this presentation goes well beyond Boise. It really talks about Idaho in general, what's happening. So feel free to interrupt me at any time. I don't really care. That works for me. My students do it all the time. They know. So on the bottom here, I put something. I should not take any credit for this. This is from Boise State's Policy Center, who just came out with their analysis, and they had this top 5 of issues that Idahoans thought were important. And of course, number 1 was growth. And I thought it was really interesting that that was the number 1. But number 2 was education. And what is really interesting, and I'm going to show you on the next slide, is they actually have the raw data on there, which, thank you, that it, for me as a researcher, makes life a lot easier. And I actually looked at all the problems that they had listed. And I hope that you can see it. What I thought is really interesting about this is that if you look at it, it's growth, 19.3%, that's the top there. Then it's education, 16.1%, and all the other ones are much lower. So growth and education are really the 2 issues that this survey indicated were the issues that people were concerned about. All the other ones are 6%, so basically going from 6 to 2%. So very different. It's a very different category of problems. If you want to have the data, it's on their website. You can all see it, and it's all on their raw data in this nice matrix print kind of stuff. This is the way we normally see it, not the nicely packaged stuff. All right. So this interest here actually came out of Idaho Smart Growth Awards, which was October or November. Or here it says November 13. Just read your slide, Jaap. And Robert Liberty was speaking there, and he made an interesting comment. That was the one thing that I wrote down. He says, Idaho is changing very quickly. If you don't pay attention, all this stuff that you like so much will be gone before you blink your eyes. And that really made me think, because I've been telling to my students that this was happening. And here was this person from the outside who came in and said, I've been here a couple of times now, and it's all changing. And you better start paying attention. So after that, I gave a presentation at the Cause of Natural Resources, a seminar, and it was called Intruders and Extractors of the American West. It was intended to get people there, right? There were only 10 people, but how Californians, Texans, Canadians, and Amazon are changing Idaho. And it actually said how are reshaping Idaho's landscape. Now, one of the reasons I said Canadians was because there's a couple of faculty members that are from Canada, and I figured they would show up and give me grief. But there was actually something to it. So I'm going to go quickly explain to you how that worked, and then I'll get to population. So I said, well, there's some forces. And after the presentation that we heard, one of the forces is that Idaho has become increasingly accessible.
Join the meeting.
Hello, welcome. Idaho is becoming easily accessible. You know, when you think about the past, Idaho was not exactly a place where you went too easily. Right? It was kind of hard to get here. There was really not a lot of stuff that you heard about. If you wanted to go buy real estate, you actually had to go here before you could see anything, right? Now you could just go on the internet and you look, hey, that's a nice house. Boy, they have some really cool homes here. Right? It has become in many ways much more accessible for everybody to come here. The second thing is we have a lot of stuff to be greedy about. Beautiful natural landscapes, relatively cheap housing, all this kind of stuff that people like. Most of our stuff is cheap when you compare it to other places. And if you think about the housing market, you know, you can buy an expensive home here, but compared to California, it's nothing. Right? So it's a relatively cheap housing market where you get some really nice home for your money. The third thing is we don't want to protect our stuff. We're really not people that want to do regulations and put all these restraints in place, right? And I actually think now with the governor, I mean, he says he's proud of that. We're the least regulated state, right? So we're proud of the fact that we don't protect our stuff. Now, I'm not somebody who says that we need to protect it, but I am somebody who says we need to start thinking about what's happening with that stuff. Because if we don't do it, somebody else will. All right, so what about the Californians? Well, California was population, right? So this is what we all see. No Californians need apply. This whole thing, all these Californians are moving to Idaho. I will show you later on that that might be true. Here's one of the things where I'm really getting challenged with, because I have data that says Californians are moving to Idaho, and somebody says, I want to see where people are moving out, right? And it says Idahoans are not moving to California. The latest data that I found is absolutely not true. We have 10,000 Idahoans moving to California. And I'm like, I'm getting really confused. And this is what can be part of this. It's very difficult to get good data about population. Diana is kicking it out like, yeah, California, we're moving to California now.
No, my daughter moved there.
And I was surprised about how high that number was. I mean, it's really quite surprising. And in this case, I would never say, what about those Californians? Because it's really not a California-Idaho problem. It's California, people are moving out, going to other states. And Idaho is only a very small part of Californians are moving to Idaho. Most of them are moving to Texas, to Washington and Oregon and stuff. All right. So the Californians were population, and I will get back to that. Then the Texans were basically about land ownership. I'm in College of Natural Resources, so I talk about land ownership. And here's some examples. The Forbes 400 newest undercover billionaires, the Wilks brothers, all right? And we probably all know about the Wilks brothers. The Wilks brothers bought basically the Potlatch properties in Idaho and now have all this property. And they have now become the largest private property owner in Idaho. Now, we know them because they close off roads and stuff. But there's actually another thing that I think is important in this series, and that is that there is more and more private ownership in the American West. And that there's more and more large landowners that buying this stuff up. So it's the Wilks, but there's a whole bunch of other ones, and I think I have taken that. Oh, here you go. Here's a list of the largest. You can't see this. It's not important. They're all big landowners in the American West. And they either use it for recreation, or they use it for hunting, or because they want to put it aside, whatever it is. The only thing with the Wilks brothers is we're not quite sure what they want to do with the land. All the other ones, it's pretty clear what their main goal is. The Wilks brothers, it's not that clear. And what was really interesting to me is with the Wilks Ranch Brokers, so that's their brokerage firm, has 62,766 acres currently for sale in Idaho. Right? That's part of the properties that are for sale. Now, as a planner, I'm really interested in because there's 30,912 acres just west of McCall that is for sale. It happens to have access to 95. I also happen to know that the county comprehensive plan, because it's actually not, what is the county? Why can't I think of it? It's not Valley County, it's Adams County.
Adams.
It's Adams County. Their comprehensive plan isn't going to stop anything, the way it's set up, right? That's a lot of land, right? That's much larger than McCall is. All right, all for land for sale is in Adams, Boise, Idaho, and Valley County. All the land that they currently have for sale. They also have land in Idaho County. So that's important. So, Canadians. Anybody know why I'm concerned about Canadians besides the fact that they were my faculty?
They're just overwhelmingly nice.
Oh, maybe not those Canadians that I'm talking about. All right, so the Canadians, I'm actually referring to mining.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we have Midas Gold and we have the Kuma project, which are basically companies that have their headquarters in Canada. Now, it's really interesting because when I was in McCall, I did a presentation, and they said, like, what do you mean, Canadians? Because this is what it shows on the website. Right? Who we are. Midas Gold Idaho is based right here in Idaho. Most of us call Idaho home. Dedicated to doing business the right way, but caring for the environment, our community, and our employees. Okay. And then I look at the board. That's one of my former students. And I'm like, how in the world did you get on the board of a major mining operation? That doesn't make any sense. You graduated 3 years ago. What have I done wrong in my life that you're doing this, right? So I look at this, and these are all descriptions of people that actually have lived there for a long time and have roots in the community. Now, however, if you dig a little deeper, you go to corporate, then you find these. Midas Gold Corporation, British Columbia, and I'm going to show you where Idaho is. There's Midas Gold, Idaho. And what you see is Midas Gold, Idaho has this little dotted line. The dotted line is that they have no interest in the mine. So actually, the people that own the mine and the people that do all this stuff is all the way on that side. Midas Gold Incorporated says, right? Midas Gold Incorporated has no ownership interest in Stibnite Gold Project. So these people that we think are running the mine have no ownership interest. It's just a local board. Now, we find that with a lot of mining corporations that actually seem to be Idaho-based, but really are not. And when you think about it, it's really people from totally different places, people that are operating, are making mines, or making money. What about Amazon, I said? What's the other one on there? Anybody know why I said Amazon?
Where?
This is really about online sales. And so we did a very quick back of the envelope kind of calculation. And we said 2018, online sales were estimated to be about 10% of all retail sales. 10% of all sales are online. Sales tax collection for 2018 was 1 billion. Well, you read the whole number. Big number, right? So if you do a quick calculation, that means that almost $3 billion in local sales disappeared to online sales. $3 billion in sales. Just people shopping on
Join
Amazon.
the meeting.
Hello. On Home Depot online or whatever it is, but they're not spending the money locally. That means that $3 billion is immediately leaking out of the economy. All right, I want to make this a little bit interactive because I'm wondering what you think and versus what we found. And I'm also going to say some of the data is it's a little iffy. Some of the data is 2 years behind at least, other data is correct, but there's stuff that is missing in there. And the people that are listening from campus know that some of this data that is out there is not as reliable as we would like to think, and we need to make some adjustments. So we're going to do as good as we can. All right, what counties do you think added the most population in 2018? Yeah.
Ada.
Ada.
Is this by number or by percent?
This is numbers. Darn it. Did you read my bubble? All right, Ada County, yes, that is correct. Anybody, anything else? Canyon County, yes. Wow, you're going down the list. What is the third one?
Twin Falls.
Kootenai.
Kootenai or Twin Falls?
Could be either one.
Could be either one. It's Kootenai, I believe. Yep. All right, then you, well, shoot, I went too fast. It's not Twin Falls. It's Bonneville County, all right? All right, you can go Bannock County, Bonner County, Jefferson County, Twin Falls, which really surprised me, was all the way on 8th place. And here's another thing, right? As a planner, I really thought that Twin Falls was in the top 4. And it's not. Elmore County and Leda County. So those are the ones that are seeing in numbers the largest growth in 2018. And again, you know, best data that I could find. And it's not always completely real. So now let's talk about different. Which counties do you think grew the fastest in 2018? If anybody guesses this, I would give them a membership to Idaho Smart Growth, but Scott is not going to like that.
Boise County.
Why do you say Boise County?
Because it's right next to Ada and it's tiny.
Darn! Man, here's a commissioner who knows what he's doing. He knows his numbers. This,
Build the roads.
it's really quite surprising how fast Boise County has been growing the last couple of years. Now, the population has been stagnant for a while and has declined, but it's actually growing very fast right now. And you have to think about where is that, right? Because if you think Avamore and North, that is really not building yet, but it will be coming pretty soon, I think. So this is really on the other side to Idaho City. So what homes are there? What is it that's happening? But it's interesting. Boise County, not something that you normally expect. The next one, Jefferson County. Valley County, Custer County, Canyon County. Now I realize Canyon and Ada County are number 5 and 6. You seem surprised, Ann.
No, Custer. I'm really interested. No, the rest of it doesn't surprise me, but Custer.
Oh, Custer is going to be a story by itself.
I want to hear.
Later on, there's a way. Custer is this bizarre place. I'm going to find out all kinds of stuff about this place. Adams County, Camas County, Kootenai, and Bonner County, right? So if you compare the two, Boise, Valley, Custer, Adams, and Camas weren't even in the places that are in population growing the fastest, right? But they are growing the fastest in percentage. It's important to realize that there's obviously a difference. So when people say, if anybody says Meridian is the fastest growing city, it's probably Boise County. Boise County is growing faster than Meridian. That's interesting. Never thought about that. All right. So let's talk population. So all these maps were created by Mark Rudd. He's one of my students. He is listening to us. So here are country growth rates between 2017 and 2018. All right, which one is growing the fastest there?
You have a little cheat sheet chart.
Oh, no, I know what it is. I'm just wondering if people...
No, I'm telling them. If
Oh,
you
yeah.
look at it,
Yeah, you have,
the cheat sheet.
because I figured nobody would actually know. So you have this thing here with all the counties on it, right? So you can look it up. And believe me, I didn't know all of them either. All right, so Clark County is actually declining. All right, Clark County is declining. And then the other one that is declining is, what is that? That is Lewis County. Right? So those are the two that are actually declining. The fastest growing counties are Boise and Valley County. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. So this is what you will see if you look at actually growth in percentages and things, right? Let's take this a little further. What determines population growth? All right. Population is the previous population, right? What was there already, plus the amount of births, plus the amount of deaths, or minus the amount of deaths, let's take them off, plus the migration. Now, if you go to the US Census, the census is pretty good, and some people will disagree with it, but they're relatively good at previous population, births, and deaths, right? That's pretty standard kind of stuff to do. Migration is a different part. Now, the census has the interesting thing is that they can actually use tax records, right? So they could actually figure out what is happening based on who is filing their taxes where. Now, think about that, though. By the time those tax records become available, that's probably 2 years later, right? So they're always with the predictions 2 years behind. So those predictions that they have are continuously adjusted. And it is because that migration part, although they have reliable data, there's a time lag there. So migration, on the other hand, also has in-state component and an out-of-state component. Right? It has people in the state move, and we always forget that, but they do, and out-of-state. So let's look at this a little bit more careful. What's really happening? Here was the county growth rates. Here is the in-state migration. Right? So this is what's happening in the state itself. And what you see is that you realize all these counties around, well, first of all, we're actually losing people in Ada County. And we're not losing people, we're losing people that have lived here, right? So people that live here are actually moving out, they're going to other places. It's the same, you see Payette County? That must be a very undesirable place because Idahoans are moving out like crazy. But if you can look on the right-hand side map, you see it's blue, it's actually increasing in population. So this gives me an idea about what's happening in the state, where people are moving out and where people are moving in. And interesting enough, you see in northern Idaho, people are moving out. Idahoans are actually moving out of northern Idaho. All right, so if you now take the overall population growth and take the in-migration away, this is where people from out of state actually go. Or what they contribute to the percentage of growth. So they contribute a lot to central Idaho, which is really, and Payette County. I mean, if you want to have an out-of-state place, you have to go to Payette County. Now, where do you think people are coming from that live in Payette County? Who is going to Payette County?
Oregon.
It's Eastern Oregon, right? And so that's one of the other things that I think is really interesting to know is that if you look here, this is a lot of people from Washington. You know, it's not necessarily the Californians, it's people from Eastern Washington. And think about the Spokane region, right? That's a region where people are just moving back and forth. That's a lot of the growth that is occurring there. Here, this is more California. This is more California. And what was this here? I already talked about that. Oh, no, this is Eastern Washington mostly. So let's look a little bit more at that. Payette County folks.
Would you mind going back? I'm
Sure.
just curious, the demographics of the people that are moving to central Idaho. Is it,
I'm going to give you some idea about it shortly, but we really don't know. All right, so this is one of those things we don't know. Now I know that people are moving, but I don't really know who these people are. Right? And that's a real challenge because if they're old people, then they need services, certain services. If they're young people, they need schools. If there are people that need a job, then we need to create jobs. If there are people with money, then we don't need to worry about jobs. Right? So that's, I think, the real challenge. But first of all, I want to start at least understanding some of these things. So Payette County, I just thought it was fascinating since that was the one that had the most interesting thing. So people in Payette County are moving to Canyon County. Now, you will immediately see there's very small numbers because Payette County does not have a large population. But 320 people moved to Canyon County, they're moving to Ada County, they're moving to Washington County, they're moving to Gem County, and they're moving to Valley County. Anybody notice anything? Sorry?
They're not going far.
They're not going far, right? Sounds simple, right? But it's actually really relevant because you will start seeing with other places, that's the norm. People are not moving from eastern Idaho to northern Idaho or whatever it is. They're moving fairly close by typically. So a lot of these in-state movements are relatively local. Now think about this. This person that used to live in Payette County might have a job in Boise. So if this person actually moves to Ada County, they're helping reduce congestion. They're not increasing congestion because they don't have that long commute anymore. So it's much more complicated than what you think it is. All right, Gem County. Want to think about that for a second? Where are people in Gem County moving to? It was the other one that saw quite some Idahoans moving out, or residents. Gem County is next to Payette County, just on the east of it. Right? We're in the same place. All right. Also moving to Ada County. Now, these are all things that I think about if that's where their employment is that I actually, as a planner, kind of like to see. They're moving closer. They're not moving further. They're actually reducing their commute. Canyon County, same thing. And then they're moving to Payette County. This is funny, right? Some of these things you really start looking at like, what the heck is going on? All right, Boise County and Elmore County. Right? And again, all close by. They don't move very far. And in general, they're going more to the urban area. So this is actually, if you're a smart growth person, this is kind of what you like, right? They're moving towards the center. I'm making this stuff up now. Ada County. Where are people in Ada County moving to? All right.
Cheaper.
Canyon County, cheaper. Yep. Gem County, cheaper. Elmore County, cheaper. Boise County, cheaper. Valley County, maybe not. Right? But again, it's all close by, and I would predict if you start looking at who is moving, that you start seeing certain demographics, right? Because it all looks like this is cheaper. These are, and I'm making this up because I don't have the data, but I would expect that these are people that can no longer afford to live in Ada County, and they're moving out. Yes, Diana?
It's also less urban.
Less, and it's, yeah, could be another reason, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Are you including any moving or just in state?
Now, this is just in-state, right? Oh, I went wrong. So this is only in-state right now. So I'm only looking at the in-state component. I'm trying to figure out what is happening in the state itself. This data is actually from ITD. ITD has driver's license data and vehicle registration data. There's some problems with it, but it's probably more reliable than some of the other data we have. All right, anybody notice? Yeah, we already know this. They're not going very far, right? Now that's all basically in the Treasure Valley. So let's go up north. Another place where we saw a lot of people moving. Bonner County. Where do you think people are moving in Bonner County? You can look on your cheat map, right? Couldn't it? There you go. You guys are getting the hack of it pretty soon, right? This is really not that complicated. All right, what would be the next one then?
Ada?
And now it's just,
Boundary?
I guess Ada.
you guess Ada, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, she thinks there's a different pattern here. Boundary. then Ada. So you were pretty close, right? And the numbers are also pretty close. So you can actually see that in northern Idaho, people are actually moving close by, but then they're also going to Ada County, and they're moving to Leda County and Benewah County. So close by, with the exception of going to Ada County. All right, Custer County. Custer was this big slap in the middle, right? So what do you think? Where are Custer County folks moving to? Now realize, first of all, there's not very many people in Custer County, right? I think Clark County is the smallest one with like 880 people, but Custer County is not very big. Custer County has Stanley and Challis, right? Is that what is in there? Right. So where do you think they are moving to?
Bonneville
Valley.
and Ada.
This is interesting, right? They're going to Ada County. And I'm sure that number 2 is Canyon County. And when you think about it, so these are probably people that live there and they are too isolated and they're getting older. They need to move closer to the urban area. They're moving to Ada County and Canyon County. But think about this. This is an entirely different story from what we're saying for the Treasure Valley, right? And it is a different story from what we were telling for northern Idaho. So and my point with this whole presentation is, it's not that easy. There are different places that have different dynamics, and we need to respond to them in different ways. All right, and then Butte County, which is next door to it, right? So those are the local ones. Yeah.
Are you going to show us who's moving there? Because you said it's one of the fastest growing, and I want to know who's moving to Custer County.
I wish I could tell you. So it's not Idahoans, right? It's people from outside, which would make me think they're Californians. But I don't know because ITD has not given me that data. But ITD should know this stuff, right? So they have the driver's license surrender data. And if they would just give us that data, I could actually see exactly where people are moving from out of state. Lamai County and Bonneville County. So that's all the close by stuff. All right. Now, this is what I gave you from Ida County. And this is, I'm an academic, but I also like to tell a story. And if I just tell you the real story, the story is a little bit more complicated. It's not just close by because the next ones are all Twin Falls, Kootenai, Payette, Leda County, and Oahe County. Right, so there are some changes here. But this is also the largest area where people are moving out of. Right? So this actually, Ada County is losing more population than any other county. Even we're growing fast. Notice anything though? Most of that is actually to urban areas. Right? Leda County, I know in Leda County, people from Boise are not moving to Leda County, they're moving to Moscow. And if you go to Leda County itself, it's people from Eastern Washington. All right. More important than growth is, I think, change. Right? So it really doesn't matter that much. What I really want to do is change. And I think change measures what I would call stability of a community. So one way that I can try to think about it is, what if I think about total people exchange, which is people leaving and people coming in, and I just add them, right? Because that's an idea for how much exchange is happening, how stable or unstable a community is. Does that make sense to people? Okay. If it's not, it's okay. All right. Which county saw the biggest change in population in 2018? So both going and coming, you think? Ada. Anybody want to fight with that?
By percent or by total?
I'm not sure. I think this is by total. So I think Ada County is good. Then we know the next one, right? Canyon. We should know the third one now. It's up north, right? I think. Yep. See, I'm starting to get the hang of this now. All right. Bonneville, Twin Falls. Hey, that's interesting. Twin Falls is now higher, right? There's actually more exchange going on. Even though it was all the way in the bottom last time, it's actually coming up. So in Twin Falls, there is more instability. There's more change going on. Sarah is from there. She's like, yes, it is true. You are right. Thank you. Bannock County, Payette County. Not growing necessarily fast, but a lot of people moving out and a lot of people moving in, so there is a lot of instability. And then Bonner County, Jefferson County, Gem County. So here's the 10. Now let's think about it in percentages, right? So not just in total numbers. These are total numbers, right? Ada County, yes, there's a lot of exchange, but there's also a lot of people that are living there, so you probably won't really notice it. So now let's look at it in, oh, here's the map. And Mark created that map again. So I think this is a really interesting map because it shows me where the population centers are, basically, right? It shows me where the cities are. That's where you have population exchange. Yes, it makes perfect sense. Any planner will tell you that's where people move, there's where people move out, there's where the population percentages is. Now I want you to remember this map before we go to the next one, all right? Now we're going to look at it in percentages. Anybody want to tell me what number 1 is in percentages?
Boise.
Boise?
Yeah.
Payette? Couldn't it?
Custer.
Custer? Wow, we're all over the board all of a sudden, right? Now all of a sudden it's not so clear anymore. It is Boise. Jim is just nailing these ones, man. Right. So Boise is not only that its population is growing, it's also really changing. Right? So that county is becoming, in my opinion, more and more unstable. Valley County. Valley County is really interesting because there's not that much population growth because it's so constrained, but there's clearly an exchange happening between people moving in and out. Right? And it's interesting because a developer is not going to think about that. A developer is interested in building things. As a planner, I'm interested in community. You know, what is happening with the community, and that community is actually changing. Gem County, who would have thought? Yeah.
Just curious what you mean by unstable. I mean, you kind of just answered it, but I just.
I'm going to get to it in the next. But there's a lot of changes in population happening there, right? And you will see at some point that I think 20% of the population changes within a short period of time. That's a lot of change coming to a community.
Yeah.
Right? What does that mean? You know, it could
It's
be.
good for realtors.
It's fantastic for realtors. That's why I have the MLS data next. See, I knew you were going to be here with the right shirt. All right, Adams County. Now, does that come as a surprise to anybody?
A little bit.
Yep. Camas County. Payette. Darn Payette. Something is happening in Payette, I'm telling you. Custer County. Lewis County, Hawaii County, and Clark County. Hawaii County to me was really interesting because I thought Hawaii County was really able not to change, but obviously it's happening. Now, look at the map. And what you're starting to see is, so the darker the color, the more populations that exchange there is, the more instability there is. What you're starting to see is that's just outside the urban area. Right? So what you see is there's influence from the urban area that is starting to expand. Which is really interesting that you're seeing these kind of patterns when you really start looking at them like, okay, so these are probably the places that are most likely to change. So if you're not paying attention there, you're going to have ex-urban development, and then after ex-urban development, you have suburban development. And so to me, if I start thinking about, as a planner, I've always been interested in cities. And I'm starting to realize these are the areas I need to pay attention to. Because these are the areas that are in transition. For some reason, they're in transition. And these are the areas that I really should be paying attention to. Of course, we really don't. All right, so what does it mean? Here we go, right? This instability, I think about it. So it indicates change, obviously. I think it indicates instability. It indicates some kind of transition. This county is transitioning to something else. It could indicate that this is the next suburb. It could also indicate that there's a new economic driver. Right, that there is something going on in that community that is all of a sudden attracting people and making other people move. Sure. Everybody's moving to Eastern Idaho. Why is that? All right, so those are the things, right? So what else do we know about population? Because I've only just thrown stuff at you that might not make sense to you or is different from what you thought. So to me, the question is really, what do we not know? Because we know very little, there is very little information, there is very little data, we're making major decisions. And I think about developers, I'm like, how do they make their decisions with this kind of, it's not exactly black and white data that we have. All right, first of all, we don't know who those people are. I don't. I can speculate. I can think based on the patterns that must be a certain demographic, but I don't know for sure. I don't have that data. Now think about it. When will I know? Hopefully after the 2020 census. By the time that's released, it's 2021. That's a little late to just sit down and do nothing. We don't know what services they need. Is this retired folks that need health care, or is it young families that need schools? I need to plan for that as a planner. We don't know what opportunities they bring. Right? So I think about the economy. If I have a bunch of people from California moving to Custer County, and they've all sold their home in California, I would say that very careful estimate is that at least they bring $2.5 million in assets. I don't have to give them a job. I just to make it easy for them to spend that money. Right? I need to make sure that they spend that money in the local economy. They're actually a source of income. But I need to know who they are and if that's actually the case. And if they are, then I'm going to focus on providing some services, making sure that it becomes easy, that they can go and have a cup of coffee somewhere, that they can have early bird dinner, whatever this kind of things is that people want to do. And I'm obviously paraphrasing it, but you need to think about this. What opportunities do people bring? We don't need, if they need jobs or create jobs. If you have a large elderly population coming in, that actually creates jobs, that creates opportunities. Or is it people with families that need additional jobs? I don't know, but I need to know. We don't know if they will add to congestion, right? Because they're going to job and they're living in Canyon County and living in downtown Boise and they're just going to be another car. They're not going to have an impact because they don't need a job. Or that they were actually moving closer by and thereby reducing traffic. I have no idea, but it has an impact. All right. This is one thing that I do know. Headline about Californians. Right? Remember the first one I said, Californians stay home. It is really about, what about these seniors? And this is data that Mark helped me find again. It says, on a typical day, 5 people under 31 will move out of Idaho. 5 people under every typical day. 5 people under 31 will move out. 7 people between 31 and 60 will become new residents. And here's the big one. 56 people over 61 will become new residents. That's pretty significant. Those people don't need jobs. All right. So Idaho's population is getting older. I looked that up. 6 counties became younger. Bear Lake, Caribou, Cassia, Clark County. Now this is fascinating. Clark County, the median age went from 42.3 to 29.7.
They only have 700 people.
880. But here's, I mean, like, when you see this kind of stuff, you're like, what the heck? That's impossible, right? But if you know that there's only 880 people living in there and that there might be something, but something happened, right? Because, or the data is wrong. Let's not forget that. The data could easily be wrong. All right, Clark County, Lincoln County, and Minidoka County. Now realize these are all counties with very small population, but those are the only ones that became younger. Now that's also interesting because people say rural communities are losing the youth. Well, these are fairly rural places, and they're actually becoming younger, not older.
You think that's due to death rates though?
You mean a lot of people are, oh man. Those 5 people that were over 100 just died. And
I think it's immigrants, probably farm workers.
Well, and their parents moved to the city.
And they're having kids.
And they're
yeah. Yeah, so I'm not sure, but it's interesting to see this kind of stuff, right? In general, we're getting older. There's a couple of exceptions, and those are relatively small rural counties. So at the same time, I think this is interesting, though. This is Idaho per capita source of income. So this is not economic activity. The state will always give you the economic activity, right? They will tell you we produce so much stuff, this, so much of this. I'm interested in what is people's source of personal income. And if you look at the source of personal income, and we have this for every county, but it was way too much to do. Actually, see here, non-services, this is actually construction and forestry and all that kind of stuff. Government is here, and this is non-labor. Non-labor is investments. It's retirement. Closely followed by services. Now, this is for the state as a whole. Well, people think of us as a state with a lot of agriculture, forestry, and all this kind of stuff. The source, and that could be true, but the source for people's personal income is very different, right? And that is really changing. And we looked at it, and there's relatively few counties in Idaho that are really where that source of personal income is different. But there are a couple. For the next presentation. All right, let's look at, I have a student, Parker, who actually used to be a real estate person, and he looked at the real estate data. All right, so only 3 counties saw a decrease in home prices between 2018 and 2019. So we only did a year data because there was just too much to put in. And those were Camas County, Custer County, darn Custer County again. Oh, it's just mind-blowing that the sheet keeps showing up, and Gooding County. So those were the only 3 counties that saw a decrease in home prices, in selling prices. Here they are. Here are the home prices. Now, there's some really interesting stuff. Here's Custer County. So I actually don't think there was a real decrease in prices in Custer County. I think there was one really expensive house that happened to be sold.
Carol King's place.
I mean, this is probably 1 or 2 homes, and that's it, right? That's why the price is so high, is because there are not that many transactions. But what you see is Blaine and Valley County are the most expensive counties. Now, to me, as a planner, that's really interesting because those are amenity-based economies, right? It's really resort communities that are there. And you see those prices are really high. I will make it available, Diana, so people can just see the slides.
Are those values like a percentage or just the number of, let's say, sold houses in 2018? And
This is the average price of houses, of the houses that were sold. Now, I should have picked median and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't have that. So this is average price of a house sold in these different counties, right? So if there's if there's one ridiculous house sold in Blaine County, then that price goes up ridiculously high. So it's not the best data, but it's as good as I have right now, right? But I think it's really interesting to just kind of look that every county or every place has it, right? It's increasing, and Blaine and Valley County are really high. I don't have Teton County. If that was there, I think that would be on there too, right? Those are the 3 really amenity-based places, and I think that's where the prices by far are the highest. As you can see, we didn't have data for all because it's in 2 different databases, and we didn't have all of them. All right, real estate market. Ada County average home price. This is, I went the wrong way. According to the data, this is new construction, and this is existing homes. I think it's really interesting that the 2 of them actually are the same there, right? But you can see the prices, and you can see how high up it is now. And if you look at Ada County, if you look at the homes that are sold, this is existing home. This is new construction. You can see new construction is slowly going up and has continued to rise. And you see that existing, oh my goodness. As a professor, I should be able to do this stuff flawlessly. But you see existing home sales are down. And it's probably because there's just not on the market, right? I can do the same thing for Canyon County. The most interesting thing is that these graphs look so similar and the prices are so similar. It's also really interesting that there's also at the exact same time that where the sales are the same. I mean, it's just really, the 2 of them are just very similar. Also interesting because I think about Boise being more expensive, and the further west you go, the cheaper it becomes. Out of the county data, you certainly don't see that. Right? It averages it out somehow. All right, here's the 2 of them. I put them next to each other. You see how similar these 2 graphs are for the Treasure Valley, right? It's really no difference. All right. Here's another one that's interesting. Idaho's real estate transactions are up. Only 4 counties saw a decrease in transactions between 2015 and 2019. Anybody want to know what those 4 are? Sure, you don't want to guess?
Yeah.
You should say Custer. Okay, Gem County, Madison County, Adams County, and Blaine County. Now, here's to me is a really interesting one, right? Because you think about why are the real estate transactions down? Well, obviously it's different from all these counties, right? Blaine County is simply because there is nothing on the market. There's no very limited new construction. There's nothing on the market. That's why there's no transactions. It's not that it's not desirable. You could see the home prices, right? How high that was on the previous thing. For those other counties, the answers might be a little bit more complicated. So 3 counties saw double-digit increases in transactions between 2015 and 2019. Now, if you know this one, Jim.
Boise.
Canyon, it's gotta be one of the 3.
Anybody else?
Valley, Boise.
So this was like one that like no way.
Bingham, your county.
Idaho County. Now, Idaho County is interesting to me because the number of transactions is only 63. Last year it was 70. But there has all of a sudden been this spike in Idaho County, where Idaho County people are now selling and buying homes. Now it's a really big county, but before it didn't show up. Before that time, it was all like 2-3 homes a year. That was about it.
But they also had a bad fire between 2015 and 2019, and a lot of people lost their homes in that area. So that would also.
That might be, yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to me that all of a sudden started showing up so high, right? And again, we don't know why. But it's just Lemhi County. Now, it used to sell 1 home a year. It's now 10, right? It's not like, and it might just be that a realtor moved in, right? But the thing is, you start looking at these things, so you start like, okay, what's going on and what are those real things going on? And then Custer County went from 2 to 7. Now, Custer County by now has my full attention because it shows up everywhere. No matter what I look at, there's something weird going on in Custer County. And I don't know what, but as far as I'm concerned, we need to do research in Custer County and figure out what is going on there and why are these things happening. Because there's some interesting things happening. It's on every list, Custer County somehow shows up. And here you see increase of real estate transactions between 2015 and 2018. The red line would mean it's similar or it's the same. So you see everybody's going up. After Valley County, Valley County is the first one that goes up. All these are going up. And then you see those 2 that are really high, Idaho and Lemhi County. And then I want to show you this one. Just for the heck of it, because I found it. This is actually, what is this? Increases, or difference in population for a variety of counties. And I wanted to show you this because this shows you from the recession on, right? Recession was here. And what you can see is Canyon County, Ada County, Kootenai County, Twin Falls. Really, the percentage didn't change much. It's pretty much a straight line. Well, we're thinking continuously that growth is happening now. It's been happening for a while now. We might not have paid attention to it. But what is really interesting is, here's the 2 amenity-based ones. Valley County, look how that dropped. That really was impacted by the housing crisis, right? And then Blaine County, same thing. So what I'm trying to figure out now is, based on these kind of real estate, can I recognize how this economy works? So I would assume that if I put Teton County on there, it would have a similar shape as Valley and Blaine have, right? Because it's the same kind of amenity-rich program, county. All right. So what the heck? I don't know. I hope that I've shown you that this is way more complicated than a bunch of Californians moving in everywhere, right? There's a whole bunch of other stuff. So Idaho, the changes are complicated. It's not just Californians. There are people coming from Eastern Washington. There are people coming from Eastern Oregon. There's people moving out. It's not just certain people coming in. To me, we really need to understand this. We need to start understanding who's moving, why they're moving, so that we can actually plan services in the right place. And it's not just about congestion. It's not just about making sure that we don't get traffic problems. There is way more stuff going on from an economic perspective. We really need to start paying attention. The data that we have is not very good. I took some liberties that this would definitely not be published in a peer-reviewed journal because there's all kind of stuff wrong here with data that is 2 years older than other data, and I just combined it because it's the only way that we can do it right now. But it's amazing to me that we don't have it. And then I think my conclusion is that based on all the stuff, we need to formulate not one response, but region-specific or issue-specific responses. So the Treasure Valley should have a certain response. Amenity-rich communities should have a certain planning approach to it. Places that are based on forestry should have a different kind of approach to it. So I'm really starting to think that planning should be much more focused on specific locations, what those locations really need. We should stop talking about Californians moving here and start thinking about what's really the issues that are going on. And not only what are the negative consequences of growth, but also what are the positive consequences and how can we take advantage of it? How can we capture income that is coming to us for free because people want to live here? And I think really $2.5 million for somebody who's retiring in California is a very low number. That's an interesting economic development strategy. But if they spend money on Amazon, it didn't do anything. Right? You need to make sure they can spend money locally. All right, thanks for enduring me. I don't think I have anything else. See, my slide doesn't even want to move anymore. So,
Question.
oh, it is the way. Yeah.
So you mentioned about Amazon. Well, you do pay tax on Amazon, so that's going to Idaho's collecting that just as they would if you bought something
Sure.
from the community. So I don't quite get that.
So if I spend money in a local store, right? And actually the sales tax is really interesting. So if I spend money in a local store, I pay sales tax, right?
Yeah.
Now that local store owner spends that money somewhere else locally.
I thought the sales tax went to Idaho.
Right, no, the sales tax goes to Idaho, right? But now that person, again, he has their dollar and he spends it in another store. And again, there's a sales tax that the state gets. That person, if it's local, spends money locally again, and again, there's a state tax. So the intent is, the thing is you want to keep money circulating in your local economy as long as you possibly can. Because that dollar becomes much more, it's a multiplier effect. It becomes worth way more than just a dollar. If the money goes to an external agent somewhere, the money is gone, right? So it should really be something that the state is concerned about because the state, it can either collect sales tax one time from Amazon or 4 or 5 times from local people. Right? So that's why it's an issue. You want to keep it in the local economy. Yeah.
So you're mentioning that having this data issue is a big one. Are there mechanisms for getting that data in place? Like you mentioned, the licensing data, you just need to get access to that. Are there other opportunities for collecting that data, or what do you see?
So planners don't use MLS data, but I think the multiple listing, we should start using that because I think that gives you a pretty good idea what's happening in the real estate world. It's kind of silly that we don't use it. ITD happens to have some data because of the driver's license and the vehicle registration. The Bureau of Labor has some data and stuff, but they all are, anything that comes from the federal level, it's always based on census data, right? And that's not specific enough. I need much more, because this is countywide data. I would really like to look at citywide data, right? So what does it actually mean if I look at more specific region? Is there a difference between McCall and places around it, right? Because this is all county, it's still aggregated. So ITD has probably the best data. I don't think they realize how important that data is and how much decisions could be improved.
Are they willing to share it? Like, did they share it?
They have it in a PDF file, but the latest data that they have is from 2015.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think we need to get to a mechanism where we realize this is not about, it's just about trying to figure out what's going on so that we can make better decisions. So, Dan.
So go back to your last slide.
My last slide.
The one just,
This was my last slide.
the one just before this. So I think based on, to me, the most important point up there is the last one. Because we talked a lot about the stuff and how we don't want to or care about protecting our stuff.
Right.
And from a planning perspective, I would think about helping regions figure out what stuff they actually do care about and figure out what the change means for that stuff. Right, so coming off of my last year work on wildfire, there's some of that data up there shows a ton of ex-urban growth. And I guarantee you almost none of it isn't going to burn down within the next 20 years. I mean, because they're not even thinking about the fact that they're in a woolly. And we have any rules on the books anywhere for planning for wildfire. So it's like, okay, we're having all this ex-urban growth and it's all going to burn up at some point because it just is.
The problem solves itself. There you go.
but what stuff have you want? Or have you not? I mean, you probably, really bad fire really hurt your groundwater or your other water. There's consequences, and that's just one tiny example.
So I think that's why it was the last point, right? I carefully built up to that last point. No, but I think this is really relevant. I really think we need to start looking at it. And I think about it as a planner, right? So we have this Planning Act, and it basically applies the same principles to everybody. I think that's wrong. I mean, why does Custer County or what else did we have? Clark County with 880 people need to do comprehensive planning? It doesn't make any sense. Why do they need to formalize that whole process? They shouldn't formalize it. They should, they've gotten along for a long time. They talk with each other. They'll figure it out in some kind of informal way. Hawaii County Initiative. People talk to each other. That's a much better process in some of these regions. So let's accept that, and let's then figure out what those issues that you need to talk about, and let's stop with, oh, we need a growth management program or something. No, that's not relevant. It's relevant for some places, but not relevant for the majority of the state. Yes, sir.
Do real estate agents currently share MLS data? Is that something that's accessible to the general population?
There is summary data online, I think, and that's how we got it. But I think we need to be much more proactive and just make sure that we look at that stuff. I want to identify where is there all of a sudden house sales going on? What does that mean?
Our real estate agent who is attending remotely says she'd like to see real estate associations request their clients to voluntarily report where people are coming from and moving to.
Yeah, and to me, one time I asked the ITD people, I said, when people surrender their driver's license or come and get an Idaho driver's license, can you just ask them a couple of questions, right? Why are you coming from here? Do you have a job? Think of 3 or 4 questions that are totally non-intrusive, but just for us to get an idea. I want to retire. I came here for the amenities. I came here, we got a job offer. It would make it much easier for us to at least have some idea about what's going on. Yeah.
One thing you could do, Jaap, is select certain specific communities, like say, go to Custer, and somehow work with that community and find a dozen people who've moved there in the last couple of years and have a conversation with them. What attracted you here? Where did you come from? Yeah.
No, and I think based on generalized data that I showed you here, right? If you start with that, then you can identify places like I need to go to Custer County. I need to know what's going on there. But there's different places where you probably want to go and okay, I want to do some more in-depth qualitative research where I'm going to talk with people and see why are you here? What's going on here? Right? Because otherwise we will not go for anything. And just think about if you would do this for cities and for communities, you would need much more information.
My question is that step, we have the academic groups like yourself that are looking at this. How does that then influence our public policy that's actually going to shape how we're growing and protecting?
Good question. Yes, John, you're.
Yeah, I think a big question for me, in a rural community, a big question I would have is if the data is showing my community is attracting a lot of retirees,
right,
are we better off owning that and capitalizing on that and seeing that as an opportunity, or should we almost take the opposite approach and say, wow, we need to attract we're losing our young people or young adults and youth. We need to do what we can to keep what we have and attract more of a younger population. I don't know what's right, but it's an interesting question to me.
Well, and then I think that's a discussion that the community should have, right?
Yeah.
That's their choice, but they should at least realize what's happening. Hey, all these people are coming.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with this? Are we going to try to attract other people, or are we going to actually take advantage of this and we're going to have a little coffee shop and we're going to sell eggs and stuff that they can just walk by and get fresh produce and all the, I don't know. Yeah. And the reason for the fresh produce is because where I grew up was this, basically a dairy farm area. And all of a sudden all these people started moving in and the cows were replaced with horses. And guess what the farmers started doing? They started making all this wonderful cheese because all these people that came that loved buying nice cheeses that were locally, and so the whole economy changed, and it worked. But we need to make that choice, right? I know you're going to ask me a question about Boise County.
No, I don't know if the data drills down, more specifically where people are coming from. Because we can move around the country freely. Anecdotally, we know a lot of people who move here because it costs less. So they come from an area where, especially after World War II, there's a real boom in building lots of infrastructure. Now that infrastructure is old, we have this obsession in this country to just we worship at the cult of infrastructure. Build, 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 bigger schools, bigger bridges, bigger roads, everything. But then they're expensive to maintain after they get to be about 50 years. And we have to pay for them. So the expense of maintaining that, and especially if it's in a sprawl. So it's like, wow, look, they haven't done that yet in the Treasure Valley. But we would just repeat that. In other words, in 50 years from now, we will see an out-migration because we've overbuilt and people can't afford it. And so they'll be moving maybe to other places in Idaho or in the West, maybe to Canada. I don't know. But is there a way of sort of assessing, or we just sort of hope the whole country moves around and understand, we've got to deal both with old infrastructure as well as don't overbuild a bunch of new stuff because we can't afford it. I don't know. Yeah, tell us what to do.
No, but here's something that I've realized, right? So with my students, if we're working on this stuff, I'm starting to realize that as a planner, my education and my focus has always been on cities, right? Planning became there because to address the problems of the inner city, right? And all our tools are built out that idea of the inner city. They're actually not really good at dealing with growth, right? So I have zoning, which separates uses because we don't want to have nuisances, but that doesn't necessarily work very well in suburbia, right? So the tools that I have as a planner are really not focusing on growth. I am perfectly good with planning in Boise. That works. My tools work, all the things that work, and I come up with some new stuff, and it's great. But as soon as I move west, it's no longer working because planning has not dealt with growth. It's never been really interested in it. Planners have never cared about rural places. Right? But what do we do instead in rural places? We start using the same urban tools in these rural places. Well, that's wrong. Right? These are not places that still need to become urban. These are rural places that have their own challenges and that we need to address in the right way. So our planning tools are we're going in there with city planning tools in a location that does not need city planning tools. It needs different tools, it needs different decision-making structures, it needs a whole different process. So I have no answer, just observation that it's not working.
I think the over 61 is in the rural areas particularly interesting, complex challenge because to your point, it could be this new economy you should be trying to take. But the fact of the matter is that population growth, if you don't address some of their long-term needs, is going to be really short for them. Because they're mostly attracting able-bodied, younger people. They're moving there because it's livable, it's they like the quality of life, it's affordable, it's all those things. But give them another 5-10 years, they are looking for really good access to medical care. Maybe they can't drive anymore. So those rural places, I think that's a really interesting, to John's point, how invested do you get in that population by the time you're finally providing them with the amenities? Right. There's not another boomer generation coming along anytime soon, and there is a little bit back, but not immediately. So if you build all the stuff and now suddenly, but you don't think about getting them around or providing them with medical, they need medical and transportation.
Well, let's think about it. If Custer County, if you all of a sudden see people over 61 moving in there, they probably went to Redfish Lake when they were younger and it was beautiful and they went there and never realized how cold the darn winter is, right? So you can either ignore that and then they will all move and after 5 years realize we're not doing another winter here, we're out, right? Or you need to start figuring out how do you provide services so that people actually stay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, sorry.
Just like your point about the tools of planning, maybe not fitting different regions. Do you think though that the principles of smart growth though would still stand?
I don't know. I certainly think in rural areas, so there's a book about smart growth in rural places, right? And I'm like, I feel it's kind of stretching, right? It's using the principles that are fine, right? But it's in applying it to a place that there might, if you had started with the place, you might have started with something, you might have ended up with something different. Now, urban place or suburbia, yeah, that makes a whole lot more sense, right? So, I don't know. And I think, one of the interesting things for me is to figure out what are the ways that we can address these problems, because no other state has succeeded in it. Now, if you think about Florida, as soon as growth happened, planners, we just totally failed. We just started suburbia, expanding. So I don't know how you react to it, but.
But you just said urban improvements would be something that we could expand to suburbia. We could do that. I mean, we could create city centers in suburban areas. Wouldn't that be an improvement?
Maybe. I think it's specific, right? So why would you want to have all these centers when you go through the Treasure Valley? Does that really make sense? The other places have thought about you put public transit in, and then every time when there is a transit stop, that's where the center starts investing. That might work, but it doesn't work everywhere. So I think we should stop thinking about these kind of generic solutions for everything and really start looking at it. What does this place all about? What kind of agriculture fits here? What is the amenities that we have? What kind of people live here? What are the water? I mean, there's so many different things that to just say, this is what we're going to do, I think this is going to fail. But, I might be wrong.
So there were meeting with other county commissioners, and I asked specifically, because she was talking about the other county, how it grew a lot, the population, and I asked her, are people, because she did a huge research of this area, and I asked, how is it, do people still want to live on their own, on a big acreage, and so that amenities is very difficult to bring to them. And she said from her studies is, yes, people want to still live in the big acreage, far away from the neighbors and driving to Boise. So that's also something to consider. We have all these cool ideas, but if the desires of the people is different, what do we do?
But I think, that again is very generic, right? So because when I think about it, okay, I grew up in a different country, right? As soon as I moved out of my house, out of that parents' house, I was a student and I lived in a little room, right? And then I had my first job and I still moved in a little room with a little kitchen in town somewhere. And then I moved in a house, a big canal house in Delft, absolutely gorgeous, best place I've ever lived. Canal house right in the center of town. We lived there with 17 guys with one shower. All right. But we lived in downtown, and that was perfect because I came from work, and we would cook together, and we'd have drinks somewhere, and life was good. Then I moved to Then I moved to Idaho, or I moved to Illinois, and I was a student again, same kind of housing, right? Then my first house. Finally buying my first house. All right, a little starter house somewhere in 6 miles out from where I worked because that was all I could afford. And then after a while, that house is not good enough. Now you go to the next. So there's all these phases in your life where you want to have different housing. And the trick is, I think, it's not that everybody wants to have a single family house with an acre land. My in-laws, that's all they wanted, right? They continuously move from one place to the next because it becomes too urban and they move to another place. And they're now in their late 70s and they want to have a condo. Right? They're done with that. They don't have the time to maintain their property and they can't do all this kind of stuff. They want to live in a little condo somewhere. So I think it depends on the stage of your life, what you want. My mom lives in a little condo somewhere. That makes sense. She's in her 70s. She's lived in a single family house for a long time. Not anymore. It doesn't make any sense. So I think you need to start thinking about what is the different kinds of housing that people really want during their entire life, not this big house this white picket fence somewhere. And I think if you start thinking about it, it starts making more sense. All right, thank you.